Welcome to Beacon of Speech. I'm Fred Hunt. Across the table from me is Ted Coley. Hi, Ted Coley.
Hi, Fred Hunt.
How are you doing today?
Okay.
What is Beacon of Speech, you ask? We're selling freedom of speech to everyone. Probably not today. We're probably going to have to tighten up on the selling freedom of speech to everyone today. But in theory, we are selling it to everyone. Or are you checking our time?
Yeah, I'm looking at my $5 watch.
You have a $5 watch?
Well, now it's probably worth even less than that.
Me and Ted, neither one of us have cell phones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so most people don't wear watches anymore unless it's, on their Fitbit or, the Apple Watch. But I know a lot of people who don't wear watches because they're like, well, why would we wear a watch when we got a cell phone? Well, guess what? We don't have cell phones. So when you pulled out the $5 watch, I'm like, Ted, you really are a relic. Doesn't that make you feel good?
Yeah, the band broke, and now I just carry it in my pocket,
Well, I was going to say, welcome to 1978, carrying around the bandless wristwatch.
That's where I live.
We are going to start, very first, we're going to start with Jesus. That's always a great topic of conversation. We love Jesus here at Beacon of Speech, don't we?
Yes.
Why are we talking about freedom of speech and Jesus in the year 2016? Ted Coley.
I don't know.
I was reading the Daily Mail in the United Kingdom, and for some, I don't know, like a year ago, I didn't read the Daily Mail at all, and now I read it every single day.
Is that a newspaper? Or?
Yeah, it's a British newspaper, but I always read it online, and it has the major news of the day, but it's also all the gossip of the day.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I like
so it's not like a National Enquirer. It's like a regular.
It's
newspaper.
What's the New York newspaper? The New York Post. I think it's like the New York Post, where it's real news, but half news, half gossip.
Okay.
Right?
And that's the Daily Mail?
Yes, the Daily Mail in the United Kingdom. And I was reading it, and it was the third or fourth story down, and one of the leading professors at Oxford, the college in Great Britain, Oxford's, like our Harvard. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right? One of their leading professors said that if Jesus was alive today in the year 2016 and he wanted to speak at a college, say they're the class of 2016 of Yale wants a guest speaker, we pick Jesus, right? Well, the guy at Oxford said in America and a lot of places in Europe, that a lot of colleges are afraid that would be too religious of a message, and they would not let Jesus speak.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, he's across the pond. Off the top of my head, I don't know where Oxford is. I assume it's in London. If it's not, I know 100% sure it's in England, right? But when he was talking about universities in the United States and in the United Kingdom, right? So we're gonna cut Oxford out because me or you, on our smartest day in our whole life, were either one of us ever going to go to Oxford?
No. One thing I was going to say, and did Bill Clinton go there?
Yes.
He did? Okay.
He went there for he graduated from wherever, but then he did his master's or his overseas thesis in Oxford.
Okay.
Yeah, so you are right. And of course, Bill Clinton, I think he used that time to get away from his girlfriend. I think at the time it was Hillary, and he's like, oh no, I got to study abroad. Get it? Abroad? But so we're going to take Oxford, we're going to throw it out. The only reason I bring it up is because that's the source of the story. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to spin it around. We're going to take the same basic question. Ohio State is 2 hours away from us, right? The class of 2016 graduates in May from the Ohio State University. Would they invite Jesus Christ to be one of their commencement speakers?
I would have to say no.
You know what? I lean towards no also. Because and again, you don't have the foresight to have seen the article, but you didn't have to read the article. You listen to talk radio, you know the state of the world. I think Ohio State would be we are a secular university. We're not having any religious people, whether it's the Pope, Jesus, the bishop. I think that the premise is correct, that they wouldn't let Jesus talk. Okay, now, on the other hand, we have a friend, his name is Doug, and he goes to Liberty, right?
Yeah.
And, well, I shouldn't say goes to Liberty. He works at Liberty University in West Virginia. Or, I said West Virginia, in Virginia.
Yeah.
They would definitely let him talk there, right? Because they're Liberty, right? But I'm thinking Cleveland State. Now, I think Cleveland State might actually let him do it, like, to get publicity. You know what I mean? But I mean, like, Ohio State, Michigan State, Big Ten schools. I think the premise is that I think the premise is mostly right. Now, the whole reason we do Beacon of Speech is we should be allowed to say what we want to say. You can say what you want to say. I say within reason. No yelling fire in the movie theater, and we've gone over that numerous times in episodes 1 through 5. But it got me to think that is a very we're not talking about Pakistan, Kazakhstan. We're talking about the United States and Britain.
Yeah.
Would not let Jesus talk at their universities. Now, again, this is a rhetorical question. Maybe if you talk to the guy at Texas Tech, he'd be like, I would drive Jesus to the door. You see what I'm saying? But I think what the guy was trying to do was spur in conversation and say, listen, people are they don't want to talk about any religion at all. Whether it's, Muhammad, Jesus, Buddha, whoever. But they use the example of, Christ because it's a Christian nation. Now, so you think, here's the thing. Jesus Christ comes back for a second coming, and we're not in the rapture, okay? We're just, we're feeling our way out. We're having a peaceful second coming instead of the rapturous second coming. Now, the rapturous second coming, as told in all those movies, what's the series? Not Born Again, but...
Left Behind?
Left Behind. Yeah, and all the Left Behind movies, now I haven't watched them all, but I'm familiar with them. None of them are peaceful, where Jesus comes back, he's shaking hands. Hey, everybody. They're all, we're going to tattoo, and you're going to burn in the pit, and there's riots and everything. Okay, we're not going with the rapturous second coming. We go with the second coming, where Jesus comes back, and they want him to talk to Ohio State commencement.
Sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
When you're talking about this, it makes me think of Robin Williams, one of his stand-up bits. He said, "You ever get the feeling that Jesus is going to come back? Only this time he's not going to look like Ted Nugent. He's going to look like Charles Bronson, and he's going to be pissed."
But see, that's even funnier. And that's the whole thing. The whole question is intriguing, and this question is going to lead to our second question, because again, we're in Ohio. We're not New York City, but we're not Texas either. We're kind of in the middle. But I agree with you. I don't think Ohio State would let them speak. I think they'd be like, well, you know what? This is a secular institution. You're a great prophet. We appreciate your time. If you're really upset, we'll give some money to your favorite charity.
Do you think they would let Muhammad speak?
That's a great question, because he specifically, the guy from Oxford, I wish I would have wrote down his name on my outline. And again, it's the Daily Mail, so, for all I know, they made up the... Let me digress. Let me circle around. The other thing that I like about the Daily Mail, okay, is as soon as they get the news, it's up online, like 10 seconds later, right? But it's a newspaper, and they don't like proofread their stuff. Like every single day, there's an error. Like they use THEIR instead of THEY''re.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if I do that, that's fine because I'm a schlub. Right? Now, if I worked for the Daily Mail, I would assume that there's editors. But every single day, the headlines are all jumbled up, and you're like, what the hell are they saying? Right? And there's misspellings. Some of the articles are like 3 lines long, and it's like, it really is like the wild, wild west of journalism. That's why I kind of like it too. It's not polished. But back to the professor, for all I know, the Daily Mail, they got hit. Even if I say his name was Professor Smith, right? Well, for all I know, it's Professor Smythe, SMYTHE, and the Daily Mail messed it up anyhow. But I don't think they would. I don't think they would let Muhammad. But you could go back and say, well, then there's a double standard that you would let this prophet and not that prophet talk.
We had a supervisor who every memo there was always at least one mistake in it.
Uh,
I don't know. I don't want to say his name.
does that supervisor's name starts with S? And he's like Santa Claus. He's got a bowl full of jelly for a tummy. But so I went back, and so we're back at Ohio State. So me and you agreed about Ohio State. Do you think they'd let Jesus talk at Harvard or Yale?
Oh no.
No.
Do you?
Oh no, because again, it's like when you look at the map of the elections, right? Well, they start at the East Coast. Well, do you think they're going to let them talk in the Northeast? No Harvard, no Yale, no Columbia, no Rutgers, right? And then you get to the Midwest, and you're like, Ohio State? I don't think so. But you never know. Maybe the guy would be like, oh no, I'm all for freedom of speech. But then you go to the guy at Indiana, and he'd be like, oh no, there'd be too many people. They're not in their safe zones. And it's nothing against Christ. We love him very much. But we're going to go in a different direction because the people who aren't religious don't. You see what I'm saying? And then by the time you get to the middle of the country, again, the guy at the University of Texas might be like, yeehaw! We're going to drink us a beer and we're going to, rope us some Phillies and we're going to have some good old times, us and Jesus. And again, they're missing the point. I'm going to drink Jesus under the table. Right? And so, but by having this me and you are having a discourse, okay? And there's no real right or wrong answer. Now, we have a webcast that nobody listens to. We were talking about this before we started, right? Now, could me and you have the conversation that we're having right now on WTAM, the local affiliate? They're a corporate-owned radio station.
Could we have it?
Yeah.
I think so.
You think so?
What do you think?
I don't know. I think they would, while we were talking, and we're looking at the computer right now, I think while we were talking, there would be a little memo across the bottom of the screen that says, go off, talk about the Indians. Talk about, like, the producer or the program director would be like, get off of religious you see what I'm saying? And then it goes back to our premise of when we started. You can talk about religious speech for 1 minute, 2 minutes. Our corporate guidelines dictate how long you can talk about religion. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what? You tackled that subject for 1 minute. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn around and we're going to go to traffic, and then we're going to talk about Steve Harvey. Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite pictures. Ted pointed to Ukraine is burning. It's one of my screensaver pictures. But so we just had. I'm looking at the thing. We had a 14-minute discourse, and we answered nothing. So we're literally useless.
Once again, we have no answers.
We have literally no answers. Now we can't even make predictions because Christ isn't here to break the tie. You know what I mean? We would, for the record, we would love to have Christ on Beacon of Speech, and he could say whatever he wants. Even if he swore, we would give him a waiver. Would you say that's fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the reason part 1 came up of the conversation is part 2. Glenn Beck, you're familiar with him.
Yes.
Glenn Beck and...
Go ahead.
I'm
sorry to interrupt again, but I have to say these things when I think of them.
That's all right.
Tony Rizzo.
Yeah.
I never listen to him.
Right.
But today, I turned him on because I wanted to hear somebody talk about the Cavs game.
Yeah.
I listened to him probably for literally a minute and a half.
Right.
And in that minute and a half, he had to say, I worked 20 straight hours yesterday. And then I turned him off.
Ted, I've told you. every time he would say, I worked 20 straight days, I would call you and say, poor Tony Rizzo worked 20 straight. You remember me doing that, right?
Well, he said he worked 20 straight hours.
Oh, 20
yesterday.
straight hours. Well, that's even better.
Now, like I said, I turned it on for probably literally a minute and a half.
He says, without fail, at least once a day during his show, he says how hard he works. Just so you know. He just doesn't come on for a 4-hour radio show. He works above and beyond. You know, probably.
And I think he said I worked nonstop for 20 hours.
Well, in his defense, he probably was working. He is probably with his third wife. He probably worked 8 hours, and then he probably had the mistress on the side, and he was doing work in air quotes for 20 straight hours. So anyhow, Jesus at Oxford. Okay, we had that discourse. Okay. This week, Glenn Beck was talking to one of his guests, and I had never heard of this guest. Okay. Now, did you listen to Glenn Beck at all this week?
Well, I have, but I think they were all guest hosts because I think he's on vacation.
Exactly. Now,
another guy who works 24/7.
No. I don't know if it was a pre-planned vacation or not. Okay, because what had happened, and again, I didn't hear it live.
You think maybe he's in the loony bin?
No. Well, no, because it's a holiday, and he might have had a holiday week. You know what I mean? You know, because, you know, I work 24/7. I need the whole weekend, blah. Okay? But the reason I brought it up, he's talking about the Constitution with a guest, just like we were talking about Jesus, right? Now, he's talking about the Constitution, and the guest said, I'm worried about this country. And again, this is reading CNN and talking, and I did not hear it live. I read it in CNN, okay? So the guest said, I don't know what we're going to do about Donald Trump. And Glenn Beck is like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, here's the deal. Just by math, there's two people running, and for all intents and purposes, it's going to be Trump or Hillary, right? And the guest is not causing any trouble. He's having a normal conversation and taking the conversation where it goes, right? And he goes, so we got a 50-50 shot at getting Donald Trump. Let's say we get Donald Trump. And again, we're talking in hypotheticals, like we're talking about if Jesus came back, right? He goes, what do we do if Trump comes back? What if Trump is such a dirty, rotten scoundrel that we have to try and impeach him? But we have a Republican Congress. Well, they're not going to impeach one of their own, right? And he goes, what is your recourse according to the Constitution? Right? And Glenn Beck is like, well, if you can't get the Congress to impeach him, then you don't have a recourse, really.
Yeah.
Right? And so what they're doing is talking out loud and moving forward. And the guest goes, listen, if he becomes president, and again, this isn't even Glenn Beck. This is the guest. He says, at some point, if he screws this country up so bad, and they don't get rid of him because he's a Republican and we're not going to get rid of our own, what happens if somebody takes matters into their own hands? And Glenn Beck's like, well, I don't want to think about that, right? And they were dancing around the subject, but they were alluding to what happens if someone shoots Trump. You know, if he is so bad that it causes somebody to, you know, shoot him. Now, that's where they went with the conversation. They never said, I think that should happen. They never said, we advocate it. Never said anything. Right? They never said anything. They just said, what happens if he's horrible and we have no recourse? Right? Now we're in a quandary. Well, you can't have dead air. You know what I mean? So they're like, well, what do you do? Okay, now, at some point, they went off topic and they went on to the next topic. And again, I wasn't listening. I'm reading the article on CNN. Right? The next day, I look on CNN, right? And they said that SiriusXM, who carries Glenn Beck, said they didn't like the tone of the conversation, and they were alluding to the fact that there could be an assassination, which they did, but they weren't advocating it. You see what I'm saying? They were having a discourse out loud. SiriusXM suspended the Glenn Beck show from Sirius, and they said, no more Glenn Beck show.
Oh, wow.
And Glenn Beck said, well, for how long? And they said, we'll let you know. Right? So again, Glenn Beck, in all of his, you know, travels.
This Just happened?
Just happened this past week, right? So, and like I said, I read the story on CNN and CNN Money. Now, here's where I have the problem with it. Nowhere did Glenn Beck say assassinate Trump. Nowhere. He didn't say it. He didn't allude to it. It was the guest. And the guest didn't say, go do it. He said, what happens if we go down road A? Just like we talked about, what if Jesus comes back? There's road A, road B, road C. Who would have him, who wouldn't, right? But Sirius, now we got to go back and, again, maybe Sirius was looking for a reason to get rid of Glenn Beck. Maybe they're like, you know what, we've had the ratings on the Glenn Beck show are going down. He's the least popular person on the Patriot channel. This is our excuse to get rid of him, right? Or maybe they were listening to the show and they were like, you know what? They did not hear what they were saying. You know what I mean? When you listen, sometimes you don't hear what people are saying.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like, oh my God, I think they're advocating assassination. You're suspended for a month and we're not going to pay you. You know what I mean?
This is just serious?
Well, that's the whole thing. It's Sirius only. Glenn Beck owns his own network, right? Did Glenn Beck, and me and you talk about this with our old boss, Steve. Steve isn't going to fire himself for the crap that he does, right? Whether I think it's right or wrong, or you think it's right or wrong, whether we have the business, whether he fits in the budget, he ain't firing himself, right? Glenn Beck was there. He knew the intent. He knew he didn't cross any lines. Glenn Beck was not going to suspend himself. You see what I'm saying? But other stations do. If I'm correct, it's the Glenn Beck Radio Network. Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah, so he's not going to suspend himself from his own show. He's not going to suspend himself from his own radio network. He even stuck up for his guest and said, listen, my guest did not say go assassinate anybody. So again, we're splitting hairs, but is speech under attack in that case? They're like, oh, well, Glenn Beck shouldn't have even brought it up. Well, he didn't. You know what I mean? Now we're on this gray, slippery slope.
Yeah.
What can you say? What can't you say? What gets you in trouble? What doesn't get you in trouble?
How are you supposed to have an interesting show when you have to be so worried about everything you say?
Right. And that's what Trevisano says all the time. And that's the whole thing. Now, I understand you can't get on the show and say, F, damn, all the other swear words. But if you're having a Discord and you're trying to have a natural flow of a conversation, you're on the slippery slope right here. I mean, here it is, between the professor and Glenn Beck. I mean, that's the whole premise. You have to be able to have an intellectual conversation about it. Now, Glenn Beck can say, you know what, I own this network. I don't care if everybody suspends me, I'm going to keep talking. And good for Glenn Beck. You know what I mean? I still think Glenn Beck is a little wackadoo, but for some reason, I get the impression that Glenn Beck is on the right track. Okay? Not always, but sometimes. Let's put it that way. Sometimes he's on the right track. Because he's been right when nobody else was right. Yeah. You know what I mean? But he's been wrong when everybody else is right, too. You know what I mean? Nobody's 100% right. And even if I don't, because I don't, like, since I got terminated, I don't think I've listened to Glenn Beck once, right? I used to listen to him before, but I don't turn on his show like, I got to listen to Glenn Beck today. I'm like, nah, that's all right. I've heard it. I get his story.
Do you turn the radio on at all, like in the house? Or
oh, yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. What I've been doing lately is I usually listen to sports talk in the morning, right? And then throughout the day, I've been listening to albums on YouTube a lot, like when I'm doing stuff, when I'm looking for jobs or doing applications. And the last thing I was listening to is a post-metal band called Pelican. They have a new album out, and I've been... It was a big thing because post-metal doesn't have any... All it is heavy metal with no lyrics, right? No singing. Well, it's boring. Well, I got all the time in the world to listen to post-metal. Well, their new album, they have one song where they have a guy singing. I'm like, holy cow! Like Pelican just invented the lead singer. That's how much in a cave I am right now. I'm like, I'm going to listen to Pelican because they got this brand new song. And Ted, they sing. It's amazing. Other people are like, okay, idiot. Every band has a singer, but not Pelican. And then my wife, me and her, we've been listening to a lot of Funkadelic the last couple of days. So Parliament Funkadelic from the 70s. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm still not. But yeah, I don't listen to that much talk radio because the whole reason I listened to WTAM was hear traffic or big news. Well,
Do you listen to Limbaugh?
Oh, hardly at all.
No.
Because I already know his spiel too. I've heard his spiel. I've heard Glenn Beck's spiel. I've heard all their spiels. And like WTAM, the main reason I listened was to hear the news because it's new, right? Well, if I'm at home and it's 10:30 in the morning and I want news, I just CNN, right? Well, you can't type up CNN when you're driving. You're kind of tied to the radio.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And because you're still tied to the radio. But now I'm not tied to the radio anymore. But I still, if I didn't love radio, I wouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If I hate it, I'm like, I can't listen to radio. So I've just been listening to a different format. I listen to Pandora, which is internet radio. Been listening to music on YouTube. And like I said, I still listen to the sports stations. But that's the whole thing. There's literally a million stations out there. And I'm like, well, you know what? ESPN radio, they said you can listen to ESPN Cleveland, Detroit, ESPN Colorado, ESPN New York. I'm like, I don't want to listen to all those shows. I don't care about any of those cities. You know what I mean? I only care about Cleveland. Well, when it comes to like sports. But there's going to come to a point where classic rock, okay, for the longest time that was the number one thing in Cleveland, and me and you talk about classic rock all the time, right? Classic rock's now 40, 50 years old. If you can't say anything and all you can do is listen to songs that you've literally already heard 1,000 times in your life, radio consumes itself, just like Iron Mountain consumes itself. You know what I mean? Well, if we lose customers, we'll raise prices. Well, every time you raise prices, you lose customers. It's the same thing with radio. Well, we're only going to play what people love, but what people love, they've heard 1,000 times. Yep. So eventually, they're going to start turning it off. Well, we're going to milk that cow till it's dry, and then it will be done. Well, we can't take any chances because we're afraid of what will happen. And then you flash back to the Glenn Beck example. And again, I'm not going back to 2012, 2008, 2008. I'm talking about last week. And he didn't get suspended by he didn't get suspended by like 1,100. 1,100 and say, well, you know what, we're going to drop you. Sirius is nationwide, all across the world. Glenn Beck, and it says Glenn Beck suspended. You know what I mean?
WTAM doesn't carry the first hour of his show.
Correct.
Okay. So it starts at 9.
Right.
And goes till noon.
Right. But basically what happened is the Rizzo show, we were talking about Rizzo, and I'm sorry about the dry Cleveland radio talk, but Rizzo show was doing so good at 9 o'clock, WTAM was just getting crushed, so they tried that spew, to try and take away the force of that 9 o'clock.
No, did you ever listen to that?
Oh, no, almost never. For some reason, I really don't like John Lanigan. Yeah. When I was a kid, I liked the Prize movie, but like listening to Lanigan and Malone, it just made me want to beat my head on the steering wheel. I mean, if you talk about like the worst radio shows that I listen, like sometimes you'll be going across country and you'll hear a radio show and you're like, that sucks, and you turn it off, right? I think some of the worst radio shows that I've ever heard in my life that I've listened to more than once, right? Number one is that Aaron Goldhammer on TAM or on KNR. That guy is horrible.
I'm trying to think. When is he on?
The 3 to 5.
3 to 5. Okay.
But he makes me want to reach through the radio and pull his lungs out. Okay. But when I was younger, Lanigan and Webster or Lanigan and Malone, I would turn that on like on the way to school, and I'd be like, this is horrible. And then like 10 years later, it's like literally the same exact shtick. And I'm like, this is still horrible. Like, you know how things will grow on you? Like the antenna in my car broke, okay? The antenna on my car broke, so I can't get AM stations very good. you have to be in like a certain position, and you can't get low wattage, blah blah blah. Right? Boring, boring, boring. Okay. So FM comes in much better. Well, I listened to a show called The Bull and the Fox on 92.3, right? And when I first listened to it, I'm like, this is the worst station there ever was, right? And then after a month, I'm like, I like The Bull and the Fox. But I was forced to listen to it because that was a station that came in the best on my, specifically my car radio. I know people will call in and say, WTAM has a stronger single. It doesn't matter. My car radio doesn't have an antenna. It broke off.
Did that just happen?
No, like 3 years ago.
No.
And then my wife bought me a replacement antenna, and it was like, it works for all cars except for like these 4 Fords. And I had like one of the Fords. I'm like, you know what? This is the way life is. But yeah, so my dog just walked over by Ted, so he's looking. I think he just wants attention. Apparently my voice scares him. So I'm on RollingStone.com this week, right? And there's a singer, okay? His name is Lucas Graham, okay? And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and they're not right or wrong answers, okay?
Okay.
But it has to do with the world today, okay? You know how I told you, the world's changing, blah, blah. Oh, wow, what a great topic for today. The world is changing, Ted Coley, right? But Lucas Graham, he's got one of the top songs in the nation, and I've heard it 1,000 times. It's on Q104, and it's, I think, 7 years old. Once I was 7 years old, and it's horrible, okay? And I told my kids, I said, whoever sang that, I just want to beat them up, right? First of all, in my head, okay, the guy is like, he was like a 17-year-old Jaden Smith. Okay, that's what I'm thinking in my head. That's what he would sound like, someone good, but someone like Jaden Smith, some punk teenager, right? Who didn't even have the song. Some 40-year-old wrote it for him. Okay, and he's just singing the lyrics. Well, I was 100% wrong. I'm not afraid to admit that I was wrong. Okay, but this guy Lucas Graham, okay. He's like 28 years old, right? And number one, he's very soulful, but he's white, and I was stunned. I thought he was black. Okay?
What's his name? Lucas Graham?
Lucas Graham, right? And he's got a moppy top, haircut. Not like the Beatles, but, big messed up hair like he's alternative or something. But it's a very soulful song, okay? I still don't like the song. I still want to punch him, okay? But why would he be in Rolling Stone magazine?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, the whole song is, this is how I thought the world was when I was 7. This is how I thought the world it was when I was 20. This is how the world's going to be when I'm 30. And this is how I think the world's going to be when I'm 60. Right? I'm like, you don't know nothing. You're a dumb punk kid. Right? Well, I'm reading the article, and the whole reason it's in Rolling Stone is because he grew up in Christiana. Do you know where Christiana is?
Christiana?
Christiana. And Rolling Stone is talking about this place like I know where it is.
Christiana. Is it in the United States?
No.
Is it England?
No, Denmark.
Denmark.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking about this song, and again, it's a top 10 hit in America. It's on the pop charts. I thought it was an R&B singer who grew up in New York or LA, right? Real soulful, but he didn't do it. It was overproduced, and they wrote the songs for him. And again, I say I didn't know, but the article is he grew up in Christiana, and I'm like, so who cares? Was Christiana a part of New York, like Queens, Yonkers, Christiana? And no,
I was gonna originally say Texas.
Yeah.
But I think I was thinking of Corpus Christi or something.
Oh, well, you could have. But so Christiana
Corpus Christi is in Texas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it got destroyed in the 1911 hurricane. Okay? But so Christiana is in Denmark. And I'm like, well, who cares? Who cares if he grew up in Copenhagen or Paris? Who cares? I hate him. Right? I hate that song. Okay? And they're like,
no matter where he grew up.
Yeah, no matter where you grow up, no matter what color you are, I hate your music, okay? Whether you're white or black, I hate your music. So, but I'm stupid, and I kept reading it because they kept talking about this place, Christiana, like it was a big deal. And he goes, well, growing up in Christiana, with all the riots and all the, cops and the way things were. And he's talking like in riddle and rhyme. And I'm like, where in the hell is Christiana? Okay. So I'm like, I'm done reading this article. I already hate this guy, right? First of all, I thought he was a teenager. He's 28. So I hate him already. Okay. So I'm like, type up Christiana. Right? And they said, it's a part of Copenhagen. I'm like, okay, well, we're at least to Copenhagen. It's in Copenhagen in Denmark, right? Well, what part of Copenhagen is it in? They said there is an old military base, okay, in Copenhagen. So imagine a big city like Paris or London on the edge of town.
So Copenhagen is a city.
Yeah, big city
in Denmark.
In Denmark. There's a big military base, and I was unclear whether it was the Americans, the Germans, or the Danes. I didn't know whose base it was, but it was a big military base on the edge of the city. The military moved out, and whether it was the Americans or the Germans, it doesn't matter, okay? What happens when you have an empty military base in your city?
It becomes an eyesore?
Oh, yes, but that's not all it did. It became an eyesore, and then a whole bunch of squatters moved in, right? Then the squatters said, we're anarchists, okay? We don't believe in the government, right? And we're just gonna squat here, and if you come, we're gonna kill you. And we're gonna do drugs while we're doing it. Okay? And the police were like, well, we're not gonna patrol the military base, go knock yourself out and squat. You know what I mean? And this would be the 1970s or 80s, right? Well, they said, oh,
and he was one of the people who did that?
No, he was the kid of one of the people who did it.
Okay.
So his parents are the first generation of squatter anarchists. Okay? Now, and again, I'm not talking about the 1600s. I didn't know this was going on. I'm reading this like this is science fiction. Like this is the Hunger Games. Okay? It's a parallel universe. I'm like, I have never in my life heard of Christiana. Okay? And they said, so the first generation, all they wanted to do was do drugs in the missile silos. And then more hippies moved in, and they said, oh, you know what we want to do? We want to make a peaceful society where there's no rules, and we can do drugs, and nobody's in charge, and we just it's like a commune.
Yeah, that always works out.
Well, yeah, that's my whole thing. So then more and more people are moving into Christiana, right? By the 1990s, there's now thousands of people in Christiana, and the government of Denmark is like, listen, you cannot live here. This is an old military base. You dirty hippies.
20 years later.
Oh, yeah.
It dawns on them.
Listen, you dirty hippies. You can't just do drugs. And I guess one of the rules of Christianity, because they're anarchists, and I don't know what one has to do with the other. And again, I'm reading this in amazement, like it's science fiction. One of the rules is no cars. You can't bring cars on the military base. So you have to walk everywhere. Okay, it says you have to leave your car here. And I'm like, why in the world? Now, again, you don't have any kids, okay? So I don't mean to pick on you, okay? But so I turn it around to myself, okay? In the 1990s, I didn't have kids, but I was old enough I could have had kids. I was in my 20s, right? Let's say I got out of high school and I had a kid. The first thing I'm not thinking about is moving into a squatter's paradise. An anarchist squatter's paradise, okay? Now, he was like, oh no, my parents are great, they're intellectuals, they were all into it, right? So, back to the story from Rolling Stone, okay? So he goes, yeah, by the 90s, all the police did was harass us.
Yeah.
It's like, let me get this straight. He said he got in, and this is where the article was real funny. He said he really connected with the music of NWA because in America, the police were harassing the people in Compton, just like he was getting harassed in Denmark. That's why he loved NWA, right? And I'm like, oh. And I'm like grabbing my head, like they are totally two different things, right? And and again, Ted, I like to think of myself as well read. I like to think that I pay attention to things. I'm like, how come I have never, ever heard of this? Okay? So, and I'm not telling you stuff you already know. You're not looking at me like, oh, Fred, you didn't know about that? This is all news to you, right?
I mean, I almost never hear anything about Denmark.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, well, that's the whole thing. I don't hear that much Danish news. So this singer said he grew up and he goes, the police were always hassling him. And he grew up in fear of the police because they were always hassling him. Let me get this straight. The police were hassling you because you were anarchist squatters and you were mad about it. So anyhow, this community went on, and he said the people always looked at him like he was different. Even though he was white, they looked at him and they're like, oh, you're one of those kids who lives in the anarchist squatter community. You know, he still went to school. His parents still sent him to Copenhagen schools.
Now, when did this start?
This started like in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
But in the 90s, the police tried to crack down because it's a squatter's, it's growing. And as far as I could tell, nobody's paying tax. If you're an anarchist squatter, you're not filling out tax returns. Is that correct?
I wouldn't think so.
So, of course, the government's going to be like, well, so he grew up in that environment. And then by the 2000s, he discovered his singing voice. And he started a band, and first they were an angry band, but then they got more melodic. And like I said, I didn't finish the article because I wanted to know about this place, Christiana, right? So I'm reading more and more about it, and everything the kid said, and again, he's 28, I know he's not a kid. Everything he said was true, right? But I'm like, I did not know that those places still existed. Now, Christiana still exists today, and it's under a list of anarchist communities in the world. And there was like a dozen of them. And I'm like, I didn't know there were anarchist communities. And I'm like, okay.
Now, where do these people get their money from?
Well, what they do is they have jobs, right? Like I think the singer said his dad worked at the university. I don't think he was a teacher. I think he was like, you know, maybe the janitor. I mean, maybe he was a teacher, but he said my dad worked at the university, right? But because I assume that if he was, say, a tenured professor, that they would want to send your paycheck somewhere. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? In my head, there's all these logistical problems, right? And I'm like, well, how do they do this? How do they do? Oh my love! And I'm not going to try to, you know, read some Danish site or whatever to try and figure it out. I'm trying to read, you know, whatever's on the internet. So Ted's shaking his head. So I type in the computer. I said, who knows? Just like, you know, me and you know Jonestown because we grew up in America and it's all over. You can't go a month without CNN having a story about Jonestown.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
I was thinking that this place was going to end up like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. Right now, they're, as far as I know, they're still there. It's just like, it's like the ghetto of Copenhagen where, you know, there's no rules. But if you were there, they'd all be like, oh, no, it's not a ghetto. It's magical where we all share. And I trade a pig for, nobody's in charge, and I just trade a pig for the horse. And, you know, once a month we have a tribal commune. And it's like, it's the year 2016. What are you doing? Okay? So I typed up, I'm like, are there any communities like this in America? Right? Because it just sounds like a cult. You know, because Denmark is not that big, it's kind of like almost like a novelty. You know, I mean, the police, it annoys them. They try to crack down, but at the end of the day, they're like, well, we're going home at 5. This is Denmark. You know, you go have fun in your squatter community. Okay? So I type in, I'm dead serious about this. I'm like, anarchist squatter communities in America. Right? Now, this is why I can't do this show by myself, Ted. I'm being 100% honest with you. I type in anarchist squatter communities in America, and one came up. Okay? Now, number one, can you believe that?
I don't believe that it's only one.
Oh no, there was a few, but there was one in Detroit.
In Detroit.
Yeah, and I'm
I
stunned.
thought you were going to say North Ridgeville.
Oh no, I'm gonna say, Ted. I'm telling you. Good. Hopefully, things go good. On the job search, or else we will have an anarchist squatter community. I already, we're going to buy tents and the family. I'm going to make sure that my son succeeds in life. I'm going to make him scrape out a living, panhandling at the thing there. But we're going to have. Where's a place that's abandoned around here? Ford factory. Well, we'll just squat in the old Ford factory. And when the police come, we go, nah, we're good. This is my home, and too bad for you. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure the Ford security guards won't call the Cleveland police or anything. But
so Detroit, huh?
So Detroit. So I type it up. The place is called Trubullplex. Trumbulplex in Detroit. Okay? And I'm being dead serious. So I'm like, what the hell is Trubullplex? Okay? And I guess there's a whole bunch of, and you know how Detroit is a rotting cesspool of garbage and, filth, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there were a couple of factories in the bad part of Detroit, and they went belly up, right? And not only did they go up belly up, but it wasn't like Ford where they still exist. You know what I mean? It was like Joe's factory. So not only did the factory go belly up, but the company that owned the factory that went belly up, the guy who owned the land, literally free space in Detroit if you want it, right? Mm-hmm. So a whole bunch of Midwestern, and again, I wish we had the TV going, settlers, okay? They went in...
Pioneers.
Well, yeah, again, it's the wild, wild west. They went into this place in downtown Detroit, and they started taking old homes and old factories and reconditioning them and saying, we are the new settlers. This is our new address. And you don't have to deliver mail here. Here's a giant mailbox. Just deliver it to Trubullplex. And whoever wants to move here, nobody's in charge, right? And they said they're not hippies. They're an artist commune. So say you have no money, right? But you want to paint, okay? You would go to Trubullplex, and in an old factory, you would paint all day, and then you would trade your picture for, I don't know, cheeseburgers that somebody else has, bought from McDonald's or whatever, right?
It almost sounds like the Beatles company, Apple.
Uh-huh.
That almost sounds like their philosophy when they started that.
Yeah.
Then they wonder why it caused so many problems.
Yeah. Well, but that's the whole thing. So Trubullplex, and part of the reason I was upset is because my wife has family in Warren, which is right next to Detroit. I have family in the suburbs of Detroit. We go to Detroit. You've gone to Detroit for work, right?
Actually, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
I haven't had the pleasure of.
But have you ever heard of Trubullplex?
No.
How in the world are there anarchist squatters 3 hours away from us, Ted, and we don't know about it? It just goes to show that I guess you don't have to know.
Man.
Now,
Detroit.
Now, I'm going to circle back to Trubullplex, okay? Now, this Christiana place in Denmark, I didn't read about it from their own mouths. I read about it from news reports, Wikipedia, news stories, right? Because I'm not familiar with the language of Denmark, okay? But if you type up Trubullplex online, Trubullplex, even though they are artistic settlers, they have their own website. So when we're done, I'll have to show you the website. But I'm like, it reminds me, now me and Ted, we don't work together anymore, but we used to. And we would talk about the Amish. And I'm not the biggest fan of the Amish, but basically everybody else at work is. Would you say that's fair?
I guess.
Every once in a while, I would come into work. I'd be like, Ted, how in God's green earth is there still Amish in the year 2016 where they think that electricity is the devil. Okay? And it's the same thing with the anarchist squatters. How in the world in the year 2016 are there... Now I understand that they're artists and it's not exactly like the situation they got in Denmark. I think it's almost like a novelty, like where they go through. But, I mean, number one, the crime in Detroit is so bad. I would think you'd have to have guns at the artistic commune, don't you? Usually artistic communes aren't known for their weaponry. You know what I mean? So number one, what do they do for security? Okay? And number two, I can't believe for 1 second that the police of Detroit are that accommodating to the urban settlers. If they have a problem, I don't get the impression that the Detroit police runs right out there. Do you get that impression?
No.
No, I don't get and no offense to them, but I don't get the impression that Detroit police runs out anywhere that quick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, again, all I can think of is logistics. I'm like, how?
Yeah, how do you make it work?
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, literally, if you live in let's step away from Denmark and just go to the Detroit model, okay? If you're painting all day, you're painting canvases and you're painting, the urban beauty, right? Where do you have to leave your home in the factory to go home to your parents' house to take a shower? You know what I mean? And it's like they can't have running water because nobody pays the water bill, right? And it's not like you can... And again, all these logistical questions come up. And, when I went to the Trubullplex site, they said, oh, it's a beautiful artistic... maybe all they do is buy bottled water and go shower at the Pilot Flying J. You know what I mean? So all this is news to you. You're not just humoring me.
No, I never heard any of this.
Okay. So, but
I think the same way you do. The first question I have is how do you make that work?
Yeah.
How do you live there?
Yeah. Oh well, it's beautiful. We trade the ducks for the potatoes, and then we trade the potatoes for the pictures, and then we only go to the Whole Foods store, and then we trade the flour. No. We're talking about Detroit. Detroit. The cesspool of filth and waste of Detroit. Don't tell me it's not there. It's all over. I have family in Flint, okay?
Oh, you do?
Yeah. My aunt,
So they were part of the water crisis?
My aunt, yes. Well, okay, I'm hedging, okay? My aunt, okay, about a year ago, this is a funny story, and hopefully my mom doesn't listen. Okay, I had an aunt who lived in Flint, right? And she tried to kill her husband. Okay, that was the one who tried to kill her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She tried to take a power saw to him. Okay, and she tried to power saw through the door, and they didn't get to the husband, and the Flint police came and took away my crazy aunt. Right? And a couple of weeks later, she died of sleep apnea, which was horrible because I have sleep apnea. I worry about that, but she lived in Flint. Well, her kids moved outside of Flint. So when I say I have family in Flint, I still think of my aunt because she's not that old when she passed away. So
that's your mom's sister.
Yeah, my mom's sister. So she passed away and she lived in Flint. And I mean, if you wanted, we could start that anarchist squatter camp in Flint. I don't even think they would care. I think they'd be all down with that. They got enough problems, with the water. And I mean, when I went to my aunt's funeral, I remember going by all these abandoned buildings. And I'm like, oh, is that the old, Ford plant? And they're like, well, that's the old blah, blah, blah plant. That's the old blah, blah, blah plant. That's the old blah, blah. And it literally, as far as the eye can see, is abandoned plants. You know what I mean?
So is Flint like a suburb of Detroit? Or
the Flint is to Detroit kind of like Worcester is to Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
So, you know what? No, Worcester's nice. Lorraine.
Okay.
Pretend like it's Lorraine, because Lorraine's a crap hole.
So how close is it to Detroit?
Oh, it's like Lorraine is to Cleveland,
Okay,
what
like
Detroit
that.
is to Flint.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it might be a few miles, but you get the point. And I'm like, wow, we can have a squatters pair, Ted. Me and you, we can sit. You know what? Maybe we should start our own little squatter cult. But we won't have an anarchist cult because nobody be in charge. We have to have a cult where me and you are in charge. Okay, kind of like the Jim Jones cult. There was at the end of the day, Jim Jones was in charge very clearly, right? In the David Koresh cult, David Koresh was clearly in charge. In all these anarchist cults I'm talking about, no one's in charge. We're all. I want the cult where I'm in charge, or me and you are in charge. Okay. I don't want any of this anarchist cult stuff. I want to make some money off of it. I'm sorry, Ted's laughing. No, because I'm reading this and I'm just so perplexed. And I'm like, I got to talk this out. Because maybe I'm just a moron. Maybe everybody knows about this and I don't know about it. You know what I mean?
No, I never heard of that.
Okay. Well, do you mind if I change subjects? Because I do want to talk about something that you're very familiar with.
What's that?
Prince.
Yes.
He's dead. Just like my aunt.
Still dead.
Okay? I think Prince and my aunt had some of the same problems. Okay? Do you know what he died of?
Opiate overdose, fentanyl? Is that it?
Wrong.
What did he die of?
No, you're right. No. Again, this week, I'm learning all this new stuff, right? Apparently, I've been on the computer too long. There was an article, and it said, it was, again, on CNN. Prince, no matter what, and this was what the article said, no matter what Prince died of, technically, which is what you said is correct, he died of VIP syndrome, which was discovered in 1964. Have you ever in your life heard of VIP syndrome?
No.
Basically, it was identified by some doctor in 1964 that the rich and the famous do not like dealing, they don't like going to... Ted, this is going to be... You better be sitting down when you hear this VIP syndrome, okay? Because you're going to be stunned.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In 1964, this doctor realized that rich people don't like waiting for things.
Mm.
They don't like waiting for doctor's appointments. They don't like waiting to go to the dentist. They don't like going to the DMV. All that stuff is a major inconvenience. Mm-hmm. Okay? Ted is shaking his head. Are you stunned that this has a name? So this doctor in 1964 came up with VIP syndrome. And he goes...
Was that very important person?
Very important person syndrome, where they want to do whatever they do, and then you cater to them. You don't go to the doctor comes to you. And because you're a very important person, the doctor wants to take care of you.
Right. You
know what I mean? That's his purpose is to... Now, according to this article, again, I have never heard of VIP syndrome either. Okay? VIP syndrome, they said the most prominent case of VIP syndrome was Michael Jackson. He didn't die of that stuff that basically puts you to sleep.
Yeah.
What was it?
Propofol or...
Yeah, but I mean, it's an anesthesia.
Yeah.
Basically, they were using anesthesia to put him to sleep every night.
Yeah.
Which is illegal as hell.
Yeah.
Right? And he said that the doctor in that case loved Michael Jackson so much, and he was basically Michael Jackson's personal doctor, and because Michael Jackson was like, this is what I want, and the doctor's like, it's illegal, but I want to keep treating you, so I'll do it. And they said that Michael Jackson had these people on strings, and they would do all of this, and I'm like, you gotta be, this is an identified thing. And so they said Prince, in his delusions, was like, well, I might be an opiate addict, but, because that was common knowledge. But I'm not going to wait at the Chanhassen Clinic. The doctor needs to come and see me. You know what I mean? Oh, did we lose ducks? Did ducks run away?
They were running around like crazy.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if...
Wait, we'll take a pause for... Let me look. I don't see... Oh, they're okay. They ran back in the pond. Because I think somebody's at the neighbor's house.
Okay.
So anyhow, so very important person syndrome, they said the most popular person to ever die of it was Michael Jackson. And I'm like, Michael Jackson died from Propofol, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't...
You can't
it's something like that. I can't think of the exact word, but it's...
Right, but it's like the old, the sex addiction thing. Oh, no, I'm just a sex addict. Oh, really? That's what you're calling it? I'm addicted to things. That's why when they came up with the VIP syndrome, because they actually came out this week and they said that Prince did die of an overdose of fentanyl, and I don't know what fentanyl is, but according to the online thing that I read up, they said it's 50 times stronger than heroin.
Yeah,
heroin is 50 times stronger than whatever below heroin was.
I'm thinking to myself, stronger than heroin,
Yeah. And so that's why I'm like, so you overdose on something. Don't come out and tell me that he died of VIP syndrome, okay? He died of an overdose of fentanyl. This VIP syndrome, that might be a characteristic of a fentanyl overdose, where like, oh, well, I'm Prince, I get fentanyl. Okay, and again, Prince is a genius. I'm not trying to besmirch anything. But this whole VIP syndrome, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like an online scam. You know what I mean? Where they're like, oh, well, send your money to Nigeria. Send us $2,000 and you won the Nigerian lottery. And they're like, oh, no, he didn't really die of a heroin overdose. He died of VIP syndrome. VIP syndrome. And I'm like, you can name anything. I mean, anybody who has money, they don't want to go to a doctor. Just like I don't want to go to a doctor. You know what I mean? Well, I mean, I know there's some people who like going to a doctor. There's weird things about everything. But I'm like, do you really have to name everything?
Yeah, it's just really sad that people who are as, like I said before, larger than life.
Right.
And how they die in such a pathetic way.
Yeah, it's very tragic. And again, I'm not trying to specifically point out Prince, but the article was like, yeah, it's a real hassle going to a doctor when you're famous. Well, guess what?
And it's a hassle when you're not.
Yeah, it's a hassle when you're not famous. When you're poor, it's a hassle going to a doctor. How are you going to pay?
Yeah.
When you have a little bit of money, it's a hassle because you got to get off of work.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I've never gone in a waiting room and there's 1,000 people. So let's say you're Prince, and again, I don't know this is the case, but we're just going to walk through the scenario. Say you're Prince, and you got to go to the addiction specialist. How many people are going to be in that waiting room? 8 or 10? Oh, I'm not. I don't want to deal with those 8 or 10 people. They know that I'm Prince, and
I don't have time for that.
I ain't got time for that. Well, then make it the first appointment of the morning or the last appointment of the day. VIP syndrome. Like I said, it's the biggest scam I heard of in a long time. So that's why
I just wonder how long he had that problem, how long he was addicted to it.
Oh,
I mean, was this like a relatively recent thing, or was this going on for,
according to, I don't want to speak out of turn. Back in the day, when Prince was, it's 1999 or Purple Rain, he did rock star drugs, right? He did whatever, whatever the rock stars are doing, that's what he did. Drinking.
Back like in the 80s?
Yeah, back in the 80s. Normal rock star stuff, okay? Supposedly, and I read this on 2 different places, right? His ex-girlfriends have said once he converted and became a Jehovah's Witness, right? He kind of backed off the drugs, but in the year 2009 he had a hip injury and he had to have surgery. When he came out of the surgery, he was in again, the Rush Limbaugh thing. He was in chronic pain, and he was popping pills like they were going out of style. Well, when did OxyContin become heroin? When did heroin become fentanyl? When did fentanyl become more fentanyl?
Yeah.
That's all gray area, doctor, patient, client. But sometime between 2009 and 2016, he went from, low core to hardcore painkillers. But again, because he's a rock star, who's to say he wasn't doing heroin in the 80s? Because they said, oh yeah, he did all the drugs. Well, which ones? Oh, well, he's a rock star. He did them all. So you don't know. And me and you, we talk about rock stars all the time. Because of HIPAA, they have to admit it. You know what I mean? And a lot of his ex-girlfriends are quick to admit, well, he was having pain issues for the last 5 years. He was having pain management issues. So, Alex, we're probably going to tie it up around 9 o'clock. What are you looking for?
A drink.
The what?
A drink.
Oh, okay. We'll get something to drink.
I got something up, but I hit my head on the top of the refrigerator.
Oh, Alex says he hit his head on the top of the refrigerator. Am I being noisy again? Yes? Okay, I'm sorry.
Fine. That's why we turned on TV.
Yeah, they're watching TV upstairs, so they don't have to hear my voice. So anyhow, VIP syndrome, Ted, I hope you don't die of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think that's going to happen for me either. I think it's going to, the other one's going to happen to me. The destitute syndrome. We talked sports so much at the beginning of the year, and then we backed off. Ted adopted a sports team. We adopted the Cleveland Indians, and we didn't talk about them because we were on hiatus for a month.
Yes.
Now, the Cleveland Indians started very slow. They were teetering along. And we picked the Cleveland Indians because we love Cleveland, right?
That's right.
And I believe it was on Wednesday, the Indians had a night game and the White Sox did not play. And I'm not for sure. But the Indians won and they went into first place by 1/2 game, right? And then after that, the Indians lost the next 2 or 3 games, so now they're tied for second. But our team, after me picking a bunch of losers, we were actually we were in first place all by ourselves for 12 hours because Chicago had like an afternoon game.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you loving about the Indians?
I don't know. I really haven't been paying attention.
You're supposed to be next week. I know that Carlos Carrasco is coming off the DL, right? And they're supposed to be better. They've been hitting like crazy. Okay,
Which is unusual for them.
Which is
right?
very unusual. And the weather's been warm, but they always start slow. It's always 40 and rainy.
Mm-hmm.
Every year. But in their defense, it's cold and rainy for the other team too. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you have no input about the Indians except for they're close to first place, so we're excited.
Yes.
Now, this week I read that we are the city of champions.
Must have been a misprint.
Why are we the city of champions? Because the Cavs are in the finals. Now, do you think they're going to finish the job? You know what? We're going to make predictions because I've been doing bad on predictions.
Well,
Didn't
we make this prediction like a few months ago?
Yes.
And I think I said that the Cavs will win the championship.
Right.
Did I say that?
Yes. But we're going to come back to that because we're going to start why we're the city of champions.
Okay.
Okay. So the Cavs, we are in the finals. We are the city of champions, correct?
I guess.
In 2 weeks, we're going to reveal this. And what day is today?
Today is June 3rd.
June 3rd. So we'll put June 20th. Okay? Fred says the Cavs are going to win. And Ted says, you already said they're going to win.
You think they're going to win?
Yeah, I think they're going to win. I think I said before I thought they were going to lose, but I think they're going to come roaring back.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
I'm kind of surprised too.
No, I'm surprised that you say that.
Well, that's because last year they lost 4-2,
Yeah.
and they didn't have
Kevin Love.
and Kyrie Irving.
Kyrie Irving.
So after watching them this year, I think they are going to win. Now, we are the city of champions. You can't just have one champion. Who else is playing?
All the Indians.
The Lake Erie Monsters.
Oh, okay.
The Lake Erie Monsters are in the Calder Cup Championship. Okay? Now, the Calder Cup is the Stanley Cup for minor league hockey. Do you think the I'm going to rephrase that. Did you know the Monsters are in the Calder Cup?
I think I heard something about that.
Okay. Well, we're not going to say whether we think they're going to win. They will win because we are the city of champions.
Is that like a 7-game series?
7-game series.
And is it underway?
Yeah. It's supposed to start Saturday, game 1, I believe.
Oh, okay. So it hasn't started yet.
Right, but the Monsters are in. The Lake Erie Monsters are the minor league affiliate of the Columbus Blue Jackets, which we were following until they tanked, right? You remember following the Blue Jackets?
No, we went to see the Monsters, right?
Yeah. And they actually won, but last year they were affiliated with the Colorado Avalanche. And then we switched affiliations to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and now they're in the Calder Cup finals. Isn't that awesome?
That is good.
Now, you don't get to pick on that. You don't get to root against
Who are they playing?
I don't even know. Some other team. The Hershey Bears or something. Hershey PA Bears.
The Lake Erie Monsters, you don't know who they're playing.
No, I have no idea. I know that the Lake Erie Monsters play in Cleveland. Number 3, the Cleveland Indians. Okay? They were 1/2 game in first place all by themselves in the middle of the week. In 2 weeks, what place will they be in?
3rd.
I was honestly gonna say the same thing. They're gonna be in 3rd place. We both agree. Now, number 4, UFC. You know how I told you we don't follow UFC? Some guy from Cleveland this past week went down to like UFC 200, went to Brazil, and he won the UFC championship for his weight class, and he's from Cleveland.
Ultimate Fighting?
Yeah. And so I heard him on the radio, and I think it was on the idiot Aaron Goldhammer show. Maybe I heard a promo for it because I don't.
It wasn't Jason, was it?
No, it wasn't Jason. But the guy said, the host said, now that you've broken the Cleveland jinx and won us a championship, and the guy's like, well, I don't know if I've broken it. I think LeBron James is going to take care of that in a week or two, blah, blah, blah. Right? I don't even know that guy's name. Okay? Here's my prediction. In 2 weeks, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't grab the mic fast enough. I still won't know who that guy is. Okay? I still won't know who won that fight that brought a UFC championship to Cleveland. Now, in 2 weeks, are you even going to remember what UFC is? That's your prediction. Are you going to remember that we even had this conversation?
Probably not.
Okay. Ted will not remember conversation.
It's already fading.
See, we went from riveting radio to NPR. Will not remember. I'll tell you what, everyone, because like I said, I like to try and listen to different things all the time. You know, I listen to NPR sometimes, and like, they could be talking as clear as day, and I'm like, I can't follow them because I just can't stick with, you know, what they're talking about.
Well, they talk real soft, and there's like no passion.
Did you know that there's an art exhibit at the museum on Thursday? And let me read the text so I don't get it wrong. Thursday at 5 o'clock.
Yes, and it's really, everybody's going to be there.
Everybody who's everybody. Yeah, and I listen to that, and it's not that they're not speaking clearly. I'm like, I can't stick with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you got high school teachers that have more zazz than they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, you should listen to NPR. No. Let me tell you something about
And
culture.
another thing about NPR is that it seems like you always have to turn the volume way up to hear it.
Yeah, because I'm half deaf as it is. You can tell by the way I yell all the time. I'm half deaf. Okay? But it's like, if I got to turn up the thing on your station and I still can't follow, I'm not listening to that either. That's one of the things I liked about Jim Rome. Jim Rome literally yelled for 3 hours. I'm like, I like the Jim Rome show. And then they took it off the air. I still got a special place in my heart for Jim Rome, though, because, like I said, when the day is really crappy, sometimes he could, like, out of nowhere, he could pull a real funny one-liner out of somewhere.
No, he's not from Cleveland, is he?
No, he's from L.A.
He's like a national...
Here's the thing with Jim Rome. He used to say he couldn't be the local L.A. sports guy and every year talk about, this big San Diego Chargers, LA Raiders game. He goes, and then that's all anybody would talk about all year round, right? He said he wanted to do national. He wanted to be challenged. He wanted to talk about everything, right? He wanted to talk about national sports. So he's from California. But when he started syndicating, only 4 stations picked him up all across the United States. It was like Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha, San Diego, and then Albuquerque, something like that.
Albuquerque.
Yeah. But when he first started, one of the first top 20 markets to pick up the Jim Rome show was Cleveland. So he always had a special place in his heart because he went from the, Albuquerque market, which was like 98, all the way up to Cleveland, which was like 19. That was like a big feather in his cap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Cleveland shrank, so we dropped out of the top 20, and then Cleveland's like, we want our own local guys, so we're going to take Jim Rome off anyhow, so we don't have a special place in his heart anymore. And since then, he went on to bigger markets. Like, I think he was in Philadelphia, which is like market number 6 or something. So the special place he had for Cleveland in his heart is gone, and Cleveland lost their special place, because there was nobody like Jim Rome on the radio. There just wasn't. Trevisano, he talked sports if he wanted to. And then when he talked, he was like, it's like talking to my grandfather. I love my grandfather, but he's like, these guys get paid too much. Yes, I know, but let's talk about it. No, I can't get past it. They get paid too much. And so Jim Rome would talk about the events of the day, and he had an edge, and he was in your face, and he yelled half the time. I liked it. And he had a dark sense of humor. You know what I mean?
So he's not on in this area anymore?
He's on KNR2, which can be heard like in 3 miles around Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights area.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't hear him in Cleveland. You can't hear him in Akron. You can't hear him on the west side. You can't hear him in Mentor. You could hear him on a swath of land, basically from East Cleveland through Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, all the way down to the edge of Solon, and that is it. That's all KNR2 broadcasts to.
Wow.
So...
And what is that, like 1540 or
1540, 1520, something like that. So we're the City of Champions. In 2 weeks, will we really be the City of Champions? I think we will. I think we're going to win. I think the Cavs are going to come out of that.
Win in how many games?
I think they might win in 7. They ain't winning in under 6 because they already lost the first game. But we're not the City of Champions. As much as I love the Lake Erie Monsters, if the Cavs lose and the Lake Erie Monsters win, we're still not the City of Champions.
When you think about it, when they talk about, the drive, the fumble, it's like you can't really include any of the Browns' close games because they weren't even in the Super Bowl.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, at least when Jose Mesa, crapped the bed, they were 1 inning away.
That was the one that they should have won.
Yeah. That was the one they should have had. And, Charlie Nagy always said, I felt horrible giving up that last run. Hey, Charlie Nagy, you're a starter. They put you in the 10th. It wasn't your fault. It was Jose Mesa's fault. And then somebody wrote in their book, I might be speaking out of turn, but I think Omar Vizquel said, we blame Jose Mesa in his book. And then Jose Mesa said, well, Omar Vizquel is a womanizer. Well, yeah, 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 he is. But that doesn't excuse you from screwing up Game 7.
Well, yeah, I never read Omar Vizquel's book, but I heard somebody say that I think when Mesa was about to go into the game, Omar Vizquel looked at him and he could just tell that he wasn't there.
Yeah, he had that like blank look, that deer in the headlights look, like, oh no. And it's funny because if my wife was down here, Jose Mesa, he used to say, oh, well, Omar was a womanizer. The thing is that my wife saw Jose, she knew who he was because he used to hang out at the bars downtown all the time.
Who's that?
Jose Mesa.
Mesa.
Yeah, so it's like, well, how do you know that Omar was a womanizer? Well, I was there and I saw.
Because I was a womanizer.
Yeah, because I was a womanizer too, but I'm just pointing out that Omar's a womanizer. And my wife, she said that they used to call him Joe Table. Because
Mesa is.
Yeah, and she goes, they would see him at the clubs all the time. They'd go there and they'd be like, oh, there's Joe Table, and it was a joke. So it's like all the way around, it was like, oh.
But I like Jose Mesa's argument that Vizquel says he blew it, and Mesa says he's a womanizer.
Yeah.
It's like saying, well, he's a jerk.
Yeah, turn blue. All right, we're at the 1:20 mark. I said I told my son we'd wrap up around 9, so it's a few minutes after 9. Ted Coley, I can't thank you enough for doing this with me. If just for the record, I'm gonna cut off the first 5 minutes of this. I'm gonna send it to WNIR, and they're gonna take a look at it. So
okay.
So hopefully they like what they hear.
Just the first 5 minutes?
Yeah, they don't want to hear all hour and a half. They don't need to hear my voice. But yeah, the gentleman specifically said first 5 minutes, and I got to figure out how to send a sound file. If I can't send a sound file, I'm going to have to send a CD. And that's part of the reason I wanted to set up the website, so I can say, here's the first 5 minutes like you ask. Here's the website that I built for Beacon of Speech, and
who is this?
WNIR. Yeah, 100.1. They got Bob Golick in the afternoons.
Okay.
And Couchburner.
Okay.
And the only problem is we're on the west side. It's in Akron. But I've listened to WNIR. It's just I can't get in North Ridgeville. When I do the Akron route, I'm familiar with the Akron guys, but I don't do that. Number one, I'm terminated, so I don't do the Akron route anymore at all. But, I only listened to it when I had to go to Akron.
Now, is this a new thing you've come across, or
has
this been brewing? I mean,
oh, no.
The last time I talked to you, were you aware of this? Or
yeah, but I didn't know how I wanted to approach it. So he asked for the first 5 minutes, so we'll go from there. And
so during this week,
I've been
in
trying.
Contact?
Yeah.
Wow.
So hopefully, but it's not for anything big. They're looking for weekend help. So, you know what? I got to flip it back over. We didn't do Song of the Day. We were talking. Song of the Day is called The Cliff. It's the vocal version of the song by Pelican. If you get a chance, go check it out. If you just go check out stuff by Pelican, you will hear things with no words.